Next part. And massive sherbet balls that make you levitate a few inches off the ground while you're sucking them, said Ron, who was plainly not listening to a word Hermione was saying. Hermione looked around at Harry. Won't it be nice to get out of the school for a bit and explore Hogsmeade? Expect it will, said Harry heavily. You'll have to tell me when you found out. What do you mean? Said Ron. I can't go. The Dursleys didn't sign my permission form, and Fudge wouldn't either. Ron looked horrified. You're not allowed to come? But no way. McGonagall or someone will give you permission. Harry gave a hollow laugh. Professor McGonagall, head of Gryffindor House, was very strict. Or we can ask Fred and George. They know every secret passage out of the castle. Ron, said Hermione sharply. I don't think Harry should be sneaking out of school with Black on the loose. Yeah, I expect that's what McGonagall will say when I ask her for permission, said Harry bitterly. But if we're with him, said Ron spiritedly to Hermione, Black wouldn't dare. Oh, Ron, don't talk rubbish, snapped Hermione. Black's already murdered a whole bunch of people in the middle of a crowded street. Do you really think he's going to worry about attacking Harry just because we're there? She was fumbling with the straps of Crookshank's basket as she spoke. Don't let that thing out, said Ron, but too late. Crookshanks leapt lightly from the basket, stretched, yawned, and sprang onto Ron's knees. The lump in Ron's pocket trembled as he shoved Crookshanks angrily away. Get out of here. Ron, don't, said Hermione angrily. Ron was about to answer back when Professor Lupin stirred. They watched him apprehensively, but he simply turned his head the other way, mouth slightly open, and slept on. The Hogwarts Express moved steadily north as the scenery outside the window became wilder and darker while the clouds overhead thickened. People were chasing backwards and forwards past the door of their compartment. Crookshank had now settled in an empty seat, his squashed face turned towards Ron, his yellow eyes on Ron's top pocket. At 1 o'clock, the plump witch with the food cart arrived at the compartment door. Do you think we should wake him up? Ron asked awkwardly, nodding towards Professor Lupin. He looks like he could do with some food. Hermione approached Professor Lupin cautiously. Professor, she said. Excuse me, Professor. He didn't move. Don't worry, dear, said the witch as she handed Harry a large sack of cauldron cakes. If he's hungry when he wakes up, I'll be up in the front with the driver. I suppose he is asleep, said Ron quietly, as the witch slid the compartment door closed. I mean, he hasn't died, has he? No, he's still breathing, whispered Hermione, taking the cauldron cake from Harry. He might not be very good company, but Professor Lupin's presence in their compartment had its uses. Mid-afternoon, just as it started to rain, blurring the rolling hills outside the window, they heard footsteps in the corridor again. And their three least favorite people appeared at the door. Draco Malfoy, flanked by his cronies, Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle. Draco Malfoy and Harry had been enemies ever since they met on their first train journey to Hogwarts. Malfoy, who had a pale, pointed, sneering face, was in Slytherin House. He played Seeker on the Slytherin Quidditch team, the same position that Harry played on the Gryffindor team. Crabbe and Goyle seemed to exist to do Malfoy's bidding. They were both wide and muscly. Crabbe was taller, with a pudding bowl haircut and a very thick neck. Goyle had short, bristly hair and long gorilla-ish arms. Well, look who it is, said Malfoy, in his usual lazy drawl, pulling open the compartment door. Potty and a Weasel. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled trollishly. I heard your father finally got his hands on some gold this summer, Weasley, said Malfoy. Did your mother die of shock? Ron stood up so quickly he knocked Crookshank's basket to the floor. Professor Lupin gave a snort. Who's that? Said Malfoy, taking an automatic step backwards as he spotted Lupin. New teacher, said Harry, who got to his feet too in case he needed to hold Ron back. What were you saying, Malfoy? Malfoy's pale eyes narrowed. He wasn't fool enough to pick a fight right under a teacher's nose. Come on, he muttered resentfully to Crabbe and Goyle, and they disappeared. Harry and Ron sat down again, Ron massaging his knuckles. I'm not going to take any crap from Malfoy this year, he said angrily. I mean it. If he makes one more crack about my family, I'm going to get a hold of his head and... Ron made a violent gesture in midair. Ron, hissed Hermione, pointing at Professor Lupin. "Be careful." But Professor Lupin was still fast asleep. The rain thickened as the train sped yet farther north. The windows were now a solid, shimmery gray, which gradually darkened until lanterns flickered into life all along the corridors and over the luggage racks. The train rattled, the rain hammered, and the wind roared, but still Professor Lupin slept. "We must be nearly there," said Ron, leaning forward to look past Professor Lupin at the now completely black windows. The words had hardly left him when the train started to slow down. "Great," said Ron, getting up and walking carefully past Professor Lupin to try to see outside. "I'm starving. I want to get to the feast." "But we can't be there yet," said Hermione, checking her watch. "So why are we stopping?" The train was now getting slower and slower. As the noise of the pistons fell away, the train and the rain sounded louder than ever. The train was getting slower and slower. As the noise of the pistons fell away, the wind and the rain sounded louder than ever against the windows. Harry, who was nearest the door, got up to look into the corridor. All along the carriage, heads were sticking curiously out of their compartments. The train came to a stop with a jolt, and distant thuds and bangs told them that luggage had fallen out of racks. Then, without warning, all the lamps went out, and they were plunged into total darkness. "What's going on?" said Ron's voice from behind Harry. "Ouch!" Hermione gasped. "Ron, that's my foot." Harry felt his way back to his seat. "Do you think we've broken down?" "Dunno." There was a squeaking sound, and Harry saw a dim black outline of Ron, wiping a patch clean on the window and peering out. "There's something moving out there," said Ron. "I think people are coming aboard." The compartment door suddenly opened, and someone fell painfully over Harry's legs. "Sorry! Do you know what's going on? Ouch! Sorry!" "Hello, Neville," said Harry, feeling around the dark and pulling Neville up by his cloak. "Harry, is that you? What's happening?" "No idea. Sit down." There was a loud hissing and a yelp of pain. Neville had tried to sit on Crookshanks. "I'm going to go and ask the driver what's going on," came Hermione's voice. Harry felt her pass him, heard the door slide open, and then a thud and two loud squeals of pain. "Who's that? Who's that? Ginny? Hermione? What are you doing?" "I was looking for Ron." "Come in and sit down." "Not here," said Harry hurriedly. "I'm here." "Ouch!" said Neville. "Quiet," said a hoarse voice suddenly. Professor Lupin appeared to have woken up at last. Harry could hear movements in his corner. None of them spoke. There was a soft crackling noise, and a shivering light filled the compartment. Lupin appeared to be holding a handful of flames. They illuminated his tired grey face, but his eyes looked alert and wary. "Stay where you are," he said in the same hoarse voice, and he got slowly to his feet with his handful of fire held out in front of him. But the door slid open before Lupin could reach it. Standing in the doorway, illuminated by the shivering flames in Lupin's hand, was a cloaked figure that towered to the ceiling. Its face was completely hidden beneath the hood. Harry's eyes darted downward, and what he saw made his stomach contract. There was a hand protruding from the cloak, and it was glistening, grayish, slimy-looking, and scabbed, like something dead that had decayed and watered. But it was visible only for a split second, as though the creature beneath the cloak sensed Harry's gaze. The hand was suddenly withdrawn into the folds of its black coat. And then, the thing beneath the hood, whatever it was, drew a long, slow, rattling breath, as though it were trying to suck something more than air from its surrounding. An intense cold swept all over them. Harry felt his own breath catch in his chest. The cold went deep. The cold went deeper than his skin. It was inside his chest. It was inside his very heart. Harry's eyes rolled up in his head. He couldn't see. He was drowning in cold. There was a rushing in his ears as though of water. He was being dragged downward, the roaring growing louder. And then, from far away, he heard screaming. Terrible, terrified, pleading screams. He wanted to help whoever it was. He tried to move his arms, but couldn't. A thick white fog was swirling around him, inside him. "Harry! Harry, are you all right?" Someone was slapping his face. What? Harry opened his eyes. There were lanterns above him, and the floor was shaking. The Hogwarts Express was moving again, and the lights had come on. He seemed to have slid out of his seat onto the floor. Ron and Hermione were kneeling next to him, and above him he could see Neville and Professor Lupin watching. Harry felt very sick. When he put up his hands to push his glasses back on, he felt cold sweat on his face. Ron and Hermione heaved him back into his seat. "Are you okay?" Ron asked nervously. "Yeah," said Harry, looking quickly towards the door. The hooded creature had vanished. What happened? Where's that thing who screamed? "No one screamed," said Ron, more nervously still. Harry looked around the bright compartment. Ginny and Neville looked back at him, both very pale. "But I heard screaming." A loud snap made them all jump. Professor Lupin was breaking an enormous slab of chocolate into pieces. "Here," he said to Harry, handing him a particularly large piece. "Eat it. It'll help." Harry looked at the chocolate but didn't eat it. "What was that thing?" he asked Lupin. "A Dementor," said Lupin, who was now giving chocolate to everyone else. "One of the Dementors of Azkaban." Everyone stared at him. Professor Lupin crumpled up the empty chocolate wrapper and put it in his pocket. "Eat," he said. "It'll help. I need to speak to the driver. Excuse me." He strolled past Harry and disappeared into the corridor. "Are you sure you're okay, Harry?" said Hermione, watching Harry anxiously. "I don't get it. What happened?" said Harry, wiping more sweat off of his face. "Well, that thing, the Dementor, stood there and looked around. I think it did. I couldn't see its face, and you... "I thought you were having a fit or something," said Ron, who still looked scared. "You're sort of rigid and fell out of your seat and started twitching. And Professor Lupin stepped over you and walked towards the Dementor and pulled out his wand," said Hermione. "And he said, 'None of us is hiding Sirius Black under our cloaks. Go.' But the Dementor didn't move, so Lupin muttered something, and a silvery thing shot out of his wand at it, and it turned around and sort of glided away." "It was horrible," said Neville, in a higher voice than usual. "Did you feel how cold it got in here when it came in?" "I felt weird," said Ron, shifting his shoulders uncomfortable, like he'd never be cheerful again. Ginny, who was huddled in the corner, looking nearly as bad as Harry felt, gave a small sob. Hermione went over and put a comforting arm around her. "But didn't any of you fall over in your seats?" said Harry awkwardly. "No," said Ron, looking anxiously at Harry again. "Ginny was shaking like mad, though." Harry didn't understand. He felt weak and shivery, as though he were recovering from a bad bout of flu. He also felt the beginnings of shame. Why had he gone to pieces like that? No one else had.